Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another deck profile. Today I'm sharing with you guys my most updated build for Black Towa. We'll go over that in today's video. If you guys are new here though, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss a video. And if you guys want to help support the channel, there are many ways down in the description you can do so. But today, guys, if you want to buy any of the cards we talk about in today's video, it would really help me out if you use my link to TCG Player down in the description. I really do appreciate it. Anyways, let's get started. So firstly, just talking a bit on the leader, I think it is one of the better black decks this format, considering the hits to the best black deck, Gogeta Xeno, going into Ultimate Squad. This deck does have one top under its belt so far that at least I've reported on, so I think it's a pretty cool one. It is a little bit rough if you don't happen to see your Unison, and the fact only one 3-cost Unison in the game can be a little sketchy, but I mean, there's a lot of reasons why I built the deck the way I did to kind of minimize that issue. And one thing I find very important about this deck is keeping it at 50 cards. A lot of decks right now, especially mid-rangey control decks that can go, you know, for a bit of a longer game, a lot of them play like 52 or more cards, but this deck, I do find it very important to stay at 50 because you really want to make sure you hit your Unison on time. And we play cards to even further exacerbate the fact that our deck is very consistent. We'll talk about that in the profile. So let's just start off with this. We have 4 copies of the Unison, of course. I personally find that I use the +1 to remove a battle card and draw more often than I do spam tokens, but if your opponent is playing a deck that can clear tokens very effectively, of course you can use a +1 to make more tokens. That's always an option. But I also do play an engine that allows our leader to create tokens with a fair amount of value, so we'll talk about that also as we get through the profile. We have 4 copies of Demogod, Towa, Furious Onslaught. This is the only Towa in the deck at the moment for an engine that we'll see later that's relevant, but I've been okay with this. This will usually end up either in your hand or drop area in a manner of ways, and you can play it, of course. It's not always the preferred win condition, but if your opponent doesn't have a counterplay that can interrupt it or some sort of floodgate, this is a very good option. 2 copies of Demogod, Poutine, Umbral Knight. I do want to bump this to 3. I was playing 4 for a long time, but I ended up cutting it down more and more because there's another Overwhelm that I find much more important in the deck. And this deck is not the best at supporting Overwhelm, but again, like, we can pitch cards with our leader in order to spam tokens. We have some other ways to put cards in the drop area that work pretty effectively. So I do again want to bump this up to 3, but I don't want to make the deck more than 50 cards, so I'm gonna have to figure out a space to cut to try and put Poutine up to 3. But we can actually summon it right from the deck, which is pretty cool. We'll see more about that later. Then we have 2 copies of Demogod, Shroud. I just find this card pretty important for matchups like Yellow Trunks, matchups like Yellow Piccolo, where you just need to have that barrier removal. This is a card you can totally side in a best of 3 or a best of 1 pre-side, especially because you can always just bring it into the main if you need it. But I do find it pretty important for specifically BO1 list or even like a BO3 where your first game is going to be unsided. I do like it in the main deck, and the critical pressure is never a bad thing either. 4 copies of Demogod, Salsa, Imperial Warrior. This is one of the coolest things about this deck, where your 1-drop searcher is also a threatening attacker. Like most other decks that have these types of 1-drop searchers that search your Unison as well as the other cards in your archetype are usually not this good. So this is a pretty cool card for the strategy. It makes the strategy really interesting. 3 copies of Vegeta, the Prince Strikes Back. We are playing 3 of this super combo for a very specific reason. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But the one thing I do like about this build in particular is that we do have better control over our life, although it is a little bit energy costly to do so. We still have better access to Vegeta, the Prince Strikes Back, which was a problem in my initial builds where I wasn't playing a particular engine that we'll see in a bit, and we didn't have that quite control over our lives. But again, our deck is a bit more energy hungry now, so we kind of have to play it a little bit differently. 4 copies of Goku, The Adventure Begins, and 3 copies of 4-Star Ball. So if I wanted to bump Poutine up to 3, I could totally cut 1 4-Star Ball and go down to 2, but playing Adventure Begins on turn 1 and searching your 4-Star Balls for the first several turns is awesome at thinning your deck out. And, you know, we're starting at a 50-card deck, and then, you know, minus our hand and minus our life, and then we take as many Dragon Balls out of the deck as possible. That's going to make our Demogod Salsa way more consistent in actually finding our Unison, which I really love. Besides that, though, the 4-Star Ball engine is a great value engine for a couple reasons. One, our leader does not draw cards on the unawakened side, so this just supplements our hand advantage and kind of gets us to the point we want to be at where we play our Unison. And 2, our leader on the backside can discard a card to play 2 tokens, so it's kind of a no-brainer to just pitch a 4-star ball, pick it right back up with Adventure Begins effect, and then it's like you spent no cards to create 2 tokens. So I do very much like this engine in this deck for that reason. Then we have one copy of Pan Time Patrol Maiden. I like this card in the deck because it's a free SCR, and again, our deck is very energy hungry, so I do find myself tapping energy for a lot of other plays. But I think you have a couple options here. Of course, there's Kai SCR if you want to be removing Unisons. Even the Brainwash Kai is pretty solid. If you can resolve that card's effect for both of its energy, you're able to essentially sort of like baby hatch your opponent on their next turn, because odds are they're not going to be attacking you with battle cards the following turn. Like, it's just very, very difficult for them to do so because of the restriction you put on them, making them crit a life. So all those are really good SCR options. And of course, if you're on more of a budget, you can totally play Heroine's Lineage, another great option for you there. 3 copies of Support the Dark Empire and 3 copies of Power Burst. We are a bit more mid-rangey, a bit more control-y, so we're playing 6 negates. Support the Dark Empire is very nice, though, because you can get yourself down to 5 life rather easily and always create that token, and the token has obvious extra synergies with this deck. Power Burst, there are several key 1-drops you want to pick up. Adventure Begins can be one of them. There's another one we'll see in just a second. We have 3 copies of Mira Creator Absorb and 3 copies of Mira Vow to the Creator. So when I was initially building this deck, back when it was like first revealed, I was having a big problem closing out games, but this engine really does help fix that. Now the problem is Mira Vow to the Creator is a little bit vulnerable to certain counterplays, particularly in red and even sometimes in blue, like against Gamma. They have the Android 18 counterplay, for example. But the cool thing is, like, you're investing 0 energy into the Vow to the Creator, so if they happen to counter it in some way, it probably eats up their counterplay for the turn. So you can go a lot of different routes with the deck. You can go like Demogod Towa into Poutine for additional pressure. You can play some other cards that we'll see in a bit. It's just it's a pretty cool way to like bait your opponent out. Of course, you always want to land the Creator Absorb if you can, but at least if you can't land it, it's not quite the end of the world. Now, I mentioned this in yesterday's video, but if you guys don't have access to Mira Vow to the Creator, because it is a very expensive tournament pack promo, there is a card called Dark Absorption Mira, which is very similar to this. It's an Overwhelm 3, and you can pay 4 energy to play your Creator Absorb as opposed to 3 energy. Now, obviously, 3 energy is better than 4 energy, but I mean, it's still a good budget alternative for you guys. Dark Absorption Mira, don't forget that name if you want to play this deck on a bit more of a budget, because besides the SCR and this Vow to the Creator, so far this deck is very, very affordable. Then we have 4 copies of Supreme Kai of Time, Guardian of Space-Time. There is unfortunately just not any great floodgates this deck can play. It's not like Finn, where it has its own built-in floodgate. Oceanus Negate is both expensive in price and in energy and gets countered very heavily by red right now. So instead of relying on floodgates, I'm just kind of relying more on raw combo power and playing the game with a little bit lower of a hand if I need to. And Supreme Kai of Time is just a black staple at this point, in my opinion. I think it's one of the best cards in black, especially when you don't have a great floodgate to rely on. You just get that value out of your combo power, and then Power Burst can pick it back up to be reused, which is very, very strong. Then we have 4 copies of Demogod Demonic Overlord. So my initial lists were not playing this engine because the problem is, while the Poutines you can play are incredible, the gravies you have to play are very, very lackluster. That's why I never really wanted to play this engine in the first place. But it is very nice to be able to have that control over your life, so I'm making that bit of a sacrifice in order to play this engine. And it does help you set up your overwhelms, which initially this leader does not do very well because there's no intrinsic burst in the deck, right? So far it's been alright. And for the other targets we're playing off this card, we're playing 1 copy of Poutine the Dark Sorcerer. It's very, very cool that this promo can play Poutine Dark Sorcerer off its own effect, because normally this is tied to yellow leaders, but we are a bit more of a mid-rangey control black deck, so having access to this in the matchups where it shines is really nice. And then for gravies, I'm trying out 2 things right now. The first one I'll mention is just a 20k. I mean, all it is a beat stick, just 20k beat stick you can play off of Demonic Overlord. Cool for clearing Unisons, cool for putting on pressure. And I'm playing 1 copy of the Gravy super combo. And the reason for that is I don't like playing a full 4 Gravy because 1, it's just inferior to Vegeta in every single way, except for the fact that you can play it from the deck with Demigod. But playing a super combo to the field is going to make it very, very vulnerable against most decks, to be honest. Like, imagine doing it against red. If you do that, they're just going to Yamcha or Videl counterplay them. If you do it against green and they use Dormant, they can just kill it on your swing. It's okay against some other colors like yellow and blue, but that's why I'm only playing the 1. If I use the Demigod and want to play a super combo from the deck, I can do it in those matchups. But as far as hard drawing my super combos, I'd always rather just have the Vegeta, so that's just my rationale on that. But overall, I do really like the ratios of this list. Again, the only thing I would want to possibly bump is Umbral Knight Poutine to 3, and we might sacrifice a ball for that. We could maybe sacrifice in another space for that. maybe even cut the 20k gravy, but I mean, having only one target for that doesn't feel all that great. But those are just my thoughts, guys. But anyways, I do really like this list. I've been working on it for a long time. Had Patreon lists when it was first revealed, then I updated it after that on the Patreon, but now I'm bringing it to you guys here in the public. So I want to know in the comments below what you think. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Yo, Dragon Ballers, quick break in the video to give a huge shout out to PPG, who is going above and beyond to make our organized play season the best that it can possibly be. I'm here on the PPG event management website. I'm going to link this down in the description, so all you have to do to sign up for any of these events is go down to that link. An event that I know for sure that I'll be attending is the Too Many Games convention in Philadelphia. This is actually a regional for the regular Dragon Ball Super organized play season. So again, guys, super huge shout out to PPG. Secondly, this website is so awesomely laid out. All you have to do is go to this website. All these different tabs here will take you to the events you want to sign up for. I hope to see you guys there. Let's get back into the video.